What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another YouTube video. We're looking at Hack the Box Business CTF. This is the last video that I'll showcase in the web category, as this is the last challenge we have left for us to solve so far. Now, before we dive in, I have to say that this is one of my favorite challenges that was part of the CTF, primarily because it pushed me into two different aspects and things that I hadn't seen before, and that was very, very cool and very, very fun. So without further ado, let's get into Larablog, which is kind of denoted as 3-star, so hard, I suppose, difficult, in the last series of web challenges, and we can get started. The challenge info says, I really like Nginx. I also really liked Laravel. That's why I published a blog post about my secure boilerplate Nginx config on my Laravel deployments. And it has a deployable part. We can start it with the Docker container. I've already spun it up, and I have it open in another tab here. Now, this presents itself to us with a deploy Laravel application using Nginx. It says, here's the secure boilerplate Nginx config I use for my Laravel deployments, like the one I deployed for this blog. Now, I was immediately, when I first looked at this, I was like, all right, this is going to be hard. Let me table this for later. I don't want to look through this right now. Because I was thinking, if it's a secure boilerplate Nginx config, I was like, oh man, is that the default? Is that just what it ships with, which is hopefully naturally pretty secure? And this keeps telling us, oh, it's secure. But if it's part of a capture the flag, it might very well be lying to you and not actually secure. So eventually, when I wanted to revisit this, I went and just literally looked through it and carved through this entire syntax here. And just for, I guess, sanity check, we can grab all of this and let's put it in a directory and work with it, I suppose. Let's move into Hack the Box Business CTF. We are in web, we're in Larablog, and let's make a directory for YouTube, as we sort of have previously been doing. Let's go ahead and create an nginx.conf file where we could slap this all in. Perfect. I don't know if I have any good syntax highlighting for an Nginx configuration file. Truth be told, I guess, could we do JSON? Oh, no, absolutely not. Would YAML work all that well? Sort, not really either. Bash is probably just going to look even more. Actually, that's not awful. The colors are important, guys. So we have a default user, nothing really telling in that regard. The worker connections, not all that telling. HTTP, a lot of this looks kind of boilerplate, again, kind of as it stated, character set, you keep alive, blah, blah, blah. Nothing that we could particularly be vulnerable on the web application itself. If you wanted to, you could get started with some GoBuster. You could get started with Nikto. And that's certainly an option on this. I would naturally start with that. For the sake of showcasing, I won't dive into that, but you might just approach this as you would any regular web challenge. Check out robots.txt, etc. In fact, do we have a robots.txt? I think I had found this and was like, oh, there's a robots.txt, but it has nothing worthwhile or interesting. So with that said, let's bring that back. I was looking through this structure here, and I thought maybe there's something weird or vulnerable in how we handle locations and actually, mapping out the web application. Now, off the top of my head, when I was looking through this first, I didn't know what try files or things might do, the fast CGI things. Some of this maybe could be potentially vulnerable somehow, and I thought, I guess I'll have to Google around and do some research. And I was just, something has to be misconfigured here because it didn't seem like there was anything else to latch onto. There was nothing else shown in this challenge. So I started to Google and research, and again, I'll drag you down that rabbit hole, but I was looking for Nginx misconfigurations. Looks like there's something all over from Detectify, Portswigger, even one from Nginx itself. That one I thought was very, very worthwhile because if that is Nginx, then maybe they'll tell us something really telling. They discuss chmod having a root inside of location block. I didn't see that present. You could kind of walk through this, and this is genuinely what I did, just walking through and trying to understand each of these and checking to see, was that going to be present in the nginx.configuration file that we were looking at. None of these, at least as I remember looking through them, were all that worthwhile. The fast CGI one was particularly interesting, but it seemed to be in the good category with document root and fast CGI name. It didn't have that kind of bad accidental absolute path there. You could use taxing rewrites. Maybe that's option. Missing HTTP prefix, proxying everything, etc., etc., etc. Nothing was really all that worthwhile as this kind of considered going on here. Yeah. Yep. Scrolling through all of this, I'm pretty sure we get to the end pretty quickly. And yeah, that wasn't the best for me, but it was something to still look into. I thought, could I do like hacking Nginx misconfigurations? And then thankfully, eventually I thought I had found a Hacktrix article because I was trying to think, okay, Hacktrix is normally pretty good. Maybe Hacktrix has something on Nginx, and of course it does. Checking this out, you could see a lot of this actually even comes from the Detectify article, so we could probably explore it through that. This might actually showcase the issue. Missing root location, that's similar to what we've just seen. Off by slash. This is actually what we're going to dive into. With the off by slash misconfiguration, it's possible to traverse one step up the path due to a missing slash. Orange made this technique well known in one of his Black Hat talks. That dude's a genius. He puts out so much stuff. And this is kind of the issue. If you have a slash API or slash directory or folder name and don't have a trailing slash, then you leave this vulnerable and actually something that you could climb up. And it's sort of like a local file inclusion style sort of thing, but it's really not. It's when you include the // the // even in as like part of what you would have been using for that alias, it's going to take this alias that you had originally defined and replace it with what you had it configured to. So that // that follows would then come just after the replacement, letting you climb up to that parent directory and jump over into where you would have had the v1 directory. So that's that structure and status. We can see that even in our display here. The assets location, which is where it seemed to be hosting like CSS or images or crap like that, that is missing that trailing slash. And then it would bring you into public, but you can get out of and past public because you're climbing up with one up traversal parent directory. I'll show you that in just a moment. Before we dive into it, I did wanted to discuss that Hacktrix discussion. This is here. Alias LFI misconfiguration. Vulnerability boils down to that, so you can climb up, and you absolutely should have a slash in here if you are trying to do this for real. They discovered this as well with Acunetics, or offer some examples. I had a feeling that something else was showcased here, in which it will like literally tell you. Yeah. Gixie. Or maybe I'm saying that wrong. Gixie is a tool to analyze Nginx configuration. The main goal is to prevent security misconfiguration, automate flaw detection. So if you haven't seen this, I used this and I was like, oh, that's super cool. Could I add this to my toolkit? Will this just smartly figure out what the problem is if I ever maybe have an Nginx thing in the future? You could go ahead and install this with pip, super duper simple, super duper easy, and then you can just pass in an nginx.conf file. I'll show you that. I have Gixie installed, but if you wanted to pip install it, you absolutely could. I apparently have it installed for Python 3. Whatever. Now we could go ahead and run Gixie on this nginx.conf, and it tells us, ooh, we found it. The alias traversal is a misconfigured alias. You could climb up a directory, right? It found that immediately, so I think that's a handy tool to keep in your back pocket. With that said, checking out the source of this web page, you can see the assets would normally be serving up, again, those images or CSS files. So we would have found that with GoBuster. We would have found that as we were exploring with things like Nikto. All of those things could have been something that we would have tracked down. But being able to leverage and use that assets directory to climb up, that is really where the secret sauce comes in. Like if I were to go to /assets on its own, it would weirdly end up returning the index.php from this page, which Laravel does its thing. But we could climb up and now potentially see more. Accessing the directory on its own means that, okay, we can't read that directory /www above public, but we might be able to access other files that would be present in there. Could we access that index.php through public? We had to add that public prefix back in, but we could. So that verifies and validates for us that we are in fact one directory above. Because I see Laravel all in here, that makes me think, are we looking at the source to the Laravel installation? We could try to go buster this. In fact, I'll be using Ferox Buster because I think that's pretty slick now. Ferox Buster, it needs a URL. We'll slap that in. It needs to know a word list, which I have saved. How is that supposed to be supplied? Is it tag word list? Or tag W? Opt, sec lists, discovery, web content. Let's use Raft small words. And because we're on Linux, we'll use every case. Yeah. So now it's trying to find stuff. It sees test, storage, config, database, apps, and these are the actual locations that would be included within Laravel itself. If you don't believe me, we could probably do some smart research because Laravel's got to be open source, right? We can just go check out Laravel on GitHub. Literally checking it out, Laravel/Laravel, all of those same directories, config, database, storage, tests, this is all present. Some of it might not be, right? But we could try to check out Artisan, or we could check out Composer, the package. In fact, let's do that. Let's check out, can we see package.json? That's a fine example. And it might also clue us into what version of Laravel we're using. Yeah, okay. This is displayed here. Laravel mix. Version 2.0. Could we actually check out Artisan? Yep, that loads for us. We could even check out the README if it exists. Nope, that one doesn't. How about the changelog? Is that present? There it is. Okay, so I think we're on maybe 5.5.28. We could actually do a better check of Laravel version. Yeah, Laravel version check. How to know the Laravel version, where is it defined? If you were to run this on the command line, PHP artisan tag version, if you were literally working with Laravel installation, that could show it to you. But if we're doing it kind of from the site or checking out the files, they check it in the composer.json file. That's one option. There we go. Laravel framework. Yep, 5.5.40. That's one option. I think there was another actually recommended in source, illuminate, all this. And you would have access to this. You would literally be able to see this because of this Nginx misconfiguration. That file specifically doesn't exist. I think there are some other spaces that might be held. Yeah, it's in vendor Laravel source illumination and application.php. This has a period, which is a mistake and should be a /. So we could try to check that out. Source foundation application.php. Still not found. There we go. You need the capital A because it's, again, case sensitive in Linux. Constant version equals 5.5.40. Now that we know what Laravel version we're up against, but there aren't a whole lot of other source code files, they're just Laravel itself, I feel like our attack surface has now just been narrowed down to attacking Laravel. With that in mind, are there any is there like vulnerabilities in Laravel 5.5.40? Let's check out exploits. Looks like there is some in exploit DV. Looks like there are some articles about this. Laracast, CVE details. Sneak has some stuff. Hacktricks includes it, of course. Back to our good friend Hacktricks. Oh, so this is a Metasploit module. Yep. Now, this is something that I had tinkered with and went down the road for. And I will save us from crashing into that wall because this makes a post request to index.php as we're accessing the normal web page. But then if it includes a method not allowed, it sort of fails. This technique would not work because it really is necessary to be able to post to Laravel. The way that it ends up actually taking advantage of this is using a new cookie, I believe. This module exploits a vulnerability in the PHP Laravel framework for these versions. Remote command execution is possible via correctly formatted HTTP XSRF token header due to an insecure unserialized call of the decrypt method in the encryptor. Authentication is not required, however, exploitation requires knowledge of the Laravel app key. Similar vulnerabilities appear to exist within Laravel cookie tokens based on the code fix. In some cases, the app key is leaked, which allows for discovery and exploitation, which kind of is interesting because we should be able to track down that app key now if we can see everything included in the source of this Laravel install. They access this in the .env file. And if, again, we were checking out our GitHub, I thought this was peculiar because if you were to look in their git ignore, right, obviously the .env file is something that they would want to hide and not push to the public repository. So checking out the git ignore in some of this might be a handy thing to keep in mind to say, oh, what secrets or what things should not be accessible in a normal repository, but are obviously going to be seen if we have this vulnerability in a live running in production application. With that said, we'll go to assets.env, and now we have the configuration and sensitive settings for this application, including the application key or the secret key. It's represented in base 64, so we could take advantage of that, but that's what this module would end up doing looking at the exploit in Metasploit. Again, it wasn't a perfect check that they had if they were trying to send a post request, and we could look into that just by simply trying to go to index.php. We could try and post this. I guess we could do that either in Firefox with burp or with curl. It displays a whole lot of crappy, annoying Laravel error messages. So doing it with curl is a little bit messy. Unless you were to redirect it into a text file and add better syntax highlighting. Maybe we could just do this in burp, and that might be a little bit nicer for us. Let's add in that target. Let's try to make sure intercept is on. We could go here, and there we go. Now we could work with this. If I change the request method to post, I just right-clicked and hit that. Now if we were to forward this, we could see this theoretically does nothing for us. Fantastic. How about another GET request? Could I see that displayed? Let's send it to repeater. Control-Shift-R to get us there. Now I'm in repeater. And if I send this, the response, I just had originally a GET request. But if I were to change this to a POST method and send that, our response gives us a 405 method not allowed. So that post method would not work, and we might have to do a little bit more digging. We might have to do a little bit more learning and research to figure out what we're up against. We could, again, keep Googling. We kind of feel like there are some breadcrumbs that we could latch onto now, given, okay, we know there's some vulnerability in Laravel in this version on how it deserializes and decrypts cookies. Do we have a cookie? That's a good question to ask. Again, I'll go to our cookie manager and we can see we have a blog session, which is indicated here, and this thing all present from this application. So maybe that is the right road to go down. We could keep exploring some of these exploits and some of these articles that we see. This is actually referenced in a Hack the Box machine. I think it was Kronos. Does this script work? Or does this do exactly the same post? We can check out the source code. They encrypt and decrypt, do all of this. And yes, their exploit sends a post with that XSRF. So that wouldn't work for us. This Rapid 7.1 just showcases the Metasploit module. Not all that helpful. Hacktricks explains everything that we've already discovered. The .env is used here. And we could encrypt or decrypt specific cookies, which is handy. But really we want to be able to craft a actual exploit chain with the deserialization. RCE is showcased here. They have this leveraged in, again, the repository that we had just seen, but that uses the post method. So that still isn't perfect for us. We could start to craft this on our own if we really wanted to, but I think we could do just a little bit more Googling, because you'll find a quick and easy one that we could latch onto and harness and channel our inner script kiddie. Is there an RCE vulnerability? Let's see. Here's a strong one. TrueSec. This is where I wanted to drive us to in our research. TrueSec put out this fantastic blog. I really like the guys over at TrueSec. We've been doing a lot of work together on some of the recent news in the real world. Laravel is weirdly helpful when apt debug is enabled. We could see in our .env that apt debug seemingly was turned off. Could I actually access that? Let's get to assets.env. It's displayed here. Yeah, apt debug. Oh, apt debug is true. Okay, nice. Never be used outside of a local dev environment. Oh, well, it is. If we can retrieve this app key, then we could do some damage, right? Understanding it, we could see the cookies that we have displayed and obviously previously checked out in our own instance. You could decode this if you were to look at this, obviously base64 decoded. And it kind of tells you what you might be looking at with encryption schemes, initialization vector and value that are then going to be used with the message authentication code, etc., etc. Here you see an example written in PHP that we could kind of work with, and then the MAC, and then the decrypt function. Now, this is handy because we're already given all this. Anyone who has access to the app key can both impersonate other users and, if enabled, make the application deserialize arbitrary data. That's what we know in our vulnerable version of Laravel. Now, the insecure deserialization happens with serialize and unserialize. They showcase an example walking through kind of classic serialization attack in PHP. They have this kind of cookie cutter example with the username, but also eventually being able to do different things like make that user an admin. You can, of course, leverage this for code execution, theoretically. They do this and weaponize it with different gadgets, and gadgets can be extremely helpful when we're working with things leveraging through different chains and pieces of PHP code. They walk through this in a little bit more depth, but then eventually get to, hey, if you want to find gadget chains, you could end up using a utility that already some smart folks have put out called PHP GTC. I don't think I've showcased this in a video before, and I, again, admittedly have not been too extremely familiar with it, but it's awesome because it's very similar to WhySoSerial in Java for deserialization attacks, which again, I've showcased. That one I actually have in Java. I think we've used a WhySoSerial.net sort of thing in ASP, etc. PHP GTC has been great, and we could experiment with it. So let's actually grab that utility and start to tinker and play. It showcases you could just go ahead and make sure you have PHP installed. And then if you run this with TACL, you can see the potential gadget chains you might use. It has support for a lot of Laravel. And if we're looking at RCE 6, 5.5 point anything, that's what we're going to be up against. The others are 0.39, but we want 4.0. And I think they actually use this in their example. So we could experiment with this. Let's go ahead and git clone that directory. I have PHP installed. If you don't, you can sudo apt install PHP 7.4 tax CLI or whatever version you'd like. With that said, let's move into that directory and run that. And now we have that utility. So as it suggested, we could use TACL, kind of get to see all of these different things that it could do. My font size is just a little bit messy for this. But of course, Laravel is in here. So using the syntax that they had used previously, could we use that Laravel RCE 6 and then generate a simple hello world payload? That's it. It just cranks it out for us, following down the chains that Laravel would have to be able to eventually execute code that I think gets passed to an eval statement. And they walk through this thing to explain the whole process. Yep. Getting into the nitty gritty of how that Laravel source code is built up. Dispatch eventually runs load and emit, dispatch to queue, eventually calls user func, and eventually brings us to eval. There we go. And we do some damage, right? So if we wanted to take advantage of this, the final step before we can send the payload is to format it in the proper way for Laravel to actually decrypt and deserialize it. We'll generate the payload, use the stolen app key to encrypt it and hash it, and then the values can then go into base64 encoded JSON object. Let's write a simple script that does this. So this is where we can kind of, again, as I alluded to, be pretty cheap, be pretty script kiddie, but I think we've made a decent amount of sense out of this attack chain, and we've already kind of brought us this far. So let's use this PHP script where they are defining the cipher that's used for Laravel key work, encryption and decryption, the chain that we might be using, supplying our base64 app key, creating a payload that's going to be generated with PHP GCC, and crafting the cookie for us. You could get a reverse shell payload if you really wanted to, and we could maybe see if this worked for us. The way that I'll do this is actually, again, probably connecting to my own public server, and then seeing if I can just get a simple ping to come across. And I typed in the wrong password there. And let's start our script. Let's call this exploit.php. And once this loads, we can close the tags here, maybe make this a little bit beautiful. And let's change this to not make a reverse shell at the moment, but let's just try and ping johnhammond.org as a simple proof of concept. Let's just to sanity check and verify that we could really work with this. So our current directory /phpgcc /phpggc, I keep saying that wrong, that will be able to execute the command for us to get the payload. And I think we're good. All we need is that app key in base64. So let's grab that, slap it in here. And now we could simply start a listener. So TCP dump ICMP. I just want to look for ping packets. There we go. I, again, have repeatedly typed the password wrong. And let's run this PHP exploit. So we have this whole chunk of a cookie for us. I'll copy that. And now let's focus over here to see if we can see any packets come through as I go back to this application, modify the cookie for our blog session, save it, and refresh the page. It didn't work. All that build up for naught. Let's get started and clear things out to begin. Let's remove these cookies. Refresh the page, so now we should have new cookies. And I think it'll actually go ahead and try to use the secondaries cookie. If we were to decrypt some of those, we might be able to see that. Okay, and that, what? That didn't look real. That just looked like a rogue. If I run this code now, does that work? No. Does that machine have ping? Can I save this and run it? Maybe we're not getting an error, but do we have ping? Maybe we don't have ping. Let's try and netcat to, I guess, quad 9. Some quick troubleshooting, right? 9999. Let me make sure that that is actually accessible on my firewall. So let me try to just do it for my host machine. Yep. Okay. So let's use this now. Get back to run that exploit. I'm going to bring this to xclip so it's saved in my clipboard. And again, let's remove these cookies. Why did it take me elsewhere? That's annoying. remove, 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 start fresh. And let's use it in the second one that we know is called for the blog session. If I save this and then refresh the page, we get the connection. So we just didn't have ping. We can see that we get it from this IP address, which is we know is our target. So the question is, could we get a reverse shell now? If I were to just use a simple netcat tac-e, I think it's worth trying. Do we have bash? Could we use that original old school netcat tac-e to get a reverse shell? Let's try that. Again, I'll run the exploit, get it in the current clipboard, bring us to up here so we can see when it happens. Let's delete all of our cookies to start from a clean slate. And let's modify that created one with the saved PHP GGC callback. And that didn't work for us. Okay, let's try to then use a regular reverse shell then. I'll go to rev shells, and looks like I've already got johnhammond.org staged here. Let's use quad 9 as we were using, and let's change this to the make FIFO ncat. There it is. Grab that syntax and try again. Cool. Rebuild. Refresh. Modify these cookies here. Probably don't need to do that every time, but I think it's still a worthwhile thing to do. Let's save that, refresh the page, and cross our fingers. Yes. All right, got the callback. Obviously, we are data, or dub, apparently as our user. We can check out what's in all of these directories and see if we can track down a flag. Let's go to the up directory, parent directory. Yep, so now we're in the root, and I see this flag GXGX or QXGXV. Let's get that boy displayed on the screen. And that is that challenge. Off by /ponage. I really, really like that challenge because I had not been familiar with those Nginx configurations before. I had not been kind of used to that Laravel exploit, and I have not even used PHP GGC in the past. So if that anything, that shows how much of a scrub and a noob that I am, a straight up script kiddie, literally just ripping that script to use. But I feel like it makes sense, and I feel like this is a tool to add into our toolkit. So I think there was still some really good learning lessons in there. I hope that you've thought the same. And that finishes up the web category for Hack the Box Business CTF in a really great finish for that Larablog challenge. I'm a little jealous that is such a fantastic task to work through. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, as I bring this to you, obviously this really was hours in the making in real time. When I showcase it just now in this YouTube video, it's a little bit more somewhat polished, right? So that we can streamline to the proper procedure and the answer. But don't forget the significant amount of time that comes with actually going through and struggling through this the very, very first time. As I said, all of this was completely new to me, so it takes much, much longer when you're trying to learn on the fly and tap dance, you know? But that's it. I might as well wrap up the video now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please do those YouTube algorithm things, like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to support me, I would be super duper grateful. I have a Patreon link and a PayPal link in the description, and I really appreciate all your support and generosity. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. We'll be right back.